the first question that kind of popped into my head as I was like refreshing on your background was how you decided to start and found a fintech company. It seemed like you had been, in senior positions at various different companies and then made the decision. So what prompted your decision to co-found the company?
Yeah, I'll tell you the journey was an interesting one, of course, for me, because I did start my career in sort of corporate America at a big company, fresh out of college, and I went spent about a decade in car rental, believe it or not, at the headquarters for Alamo and National Rental Car. And it was a great springboard to anything because I got to learn every function and aspect. I started in finance, operations, I was on sales and marketing. The company ended up relocating and I found myself looking for new work. So I actually got headhunted from a payment startup called Wildcard Systems. I knew nothing about payments. So this is around 2003, I think.
Mm.
And I interviewed with the COO and founder and said, I don't know anything about payments. And he's like, no, I know, but I love your background and I want fresh eyes on payments. So can you come help us out? And that was my first startup. After being at a large global company, it was very, very culture shock. I don't know how you say, right? So there's about 200 people when I started. So it's a little later than obviously doing it from ground up. But I became fascinated with, how much you could create, how fast you could move, and sort of, the destiny is yours. And 2 years into that, we were acquired by a company called eFunds, which brought a debit side to our prepaid side. And then 2 years after that, we were acquired by FIS. So I went through these transactions and saw, the types of outcomes you can have and the types of creativity and freedom you can have as well. And I got addicted to it. So while being at FIS was great, I did have senior level exec jobs. I had a ton of upward momentum there, but I really was craving to go back into the startup world because I just really loved it so much. So I have this odd combination of big company, small company, startup, and
Hmm.
I reached a point in my career pre-Colo where, I saw an opportunity in the payments infrastructure landscape, and I knew a lot of people from my almost 20 years there. And, the thought of doing a startup for someone else again, because this would have been my fourth or fifth for doing, not as a founder, was more interesting than going to take a big job somewhere at one of the larger fintechs. But at the same time, I was like, you know what? We have an idea, we have an opportunity, we had a team, the timing worked out with my founders. And we just said, you know what? It's time for us to do it ourselves. So that's what we did. We founded qolo because we had a vision and a dream to sort of do this ourselves.
And the specific area of embedded finance, was that clear from the very beginning that that was the area you were going to play in?
Yeah, yeah, it's funny that you say that. I would say it was the concept was there. The phrase and the buzzword of embedded probably was not there, right?
Hmm.
But in fact, our vision for qolo was to simplify everything in a way at the infrastructure level that we could power, whether it's a bank or a fintech, in a modern way. We could power all of the money movement between these new faster payment instruments, digital wallets, card issuing, whatever it might be. What we saw was that if you wanted to get a modern solution, people were forced sort of to either go do point product ecosystem builds
Hmm.
or go to the legacy companies where they had the capabilities, but they didn't have them all interconnected in an elegant way. So we're like, well, here's something that would be really different in the market is what if we had a one modern platform, a comprehensive one that put together all the payment modalities, both traditional and modern, all of the card processing and issuing at the infrastructure level, not as a middleware. And then, oh, by the way, what if we underpin it with a really sophisticated bank grade ledger underneath? So all of the money movement gets unified. And it's easier to have a cash position, a line of sight, and transparency into where your money is at any given second. So that was the vision, and that's what we built. So that is, again, we're solving for a problem of it doesn't have to be as complicated. You don't have to take on the burden of putting it all together and managing all of that ecosystem. We'll do that for you. You can concentrate on your customers and your sales and your marketing.
And as I understand it, one of your maybe focus areas is commercial banks. And was that your first kind of customer segment?
No, actually, that was a secondary vertical that we didn't actually see in the beginning, to your point, right? And circling back to your last question, all of the reasons that we created qolo to simplify things, and in a way, again, without it being the buzzword back then, we were trying to embed it into something so that people could actually just click here, right? And get more of that consumer feeling, right? The consumer payments world is everybody wants to get there. So it was embedded finance. It was embedded banking. We just weren't calling it that back then, but that was
Mm,
the parallel, if you will. And then, I think, to your second question, our vision was really any use case. And so we believe strongly that if you build and design and architect a platform properly, you can support any use case. And that's what we set out to do. So we, first going out product market fit, we were focused on fintechs. We were focused on the disruptors, right? Who wanted and sought modern technology solutions, who understood what they could do with the power of that modern platform. So we were supporting everything from gift cards and corporate incentive cards, payroll cards. We were supporting, just money movement and digital wallets for everything from casinos and agricultural farms that had disbursements that used to be check or wire or expensive money transfer options. We were displacing all of those.
mm,
Um, at the same time, during that time in the market in 2022-ish, we refined our go-to-market to include banks because we had gotten invited to an RFP for Key Bank, and we realized that, oh wow, this actual technology, this platform can do the same thing we're doing for fintechs. We can do it on the commercial banking side where they're stuck with their old legacy cores and they're facing things like, do I rip and replace, or do I surround my old core with other things? Or is there a way that I can just, in a very short time, modernize my banking core? And that's what we saw as the opportunity. We won the RFP up against crazy competition, big companies, small companies, everything. And we, realized that with that same technology, no real enhancements or custom development needed, we could actually take a bank like Key Bank in less than a year, take their old 30-year-old legacy core, and all of a sudden it's cloud-based, it's instant, it's real time, it's virtual, and they can move money with ease. So it was game changing for us, and obviously we won Huntington Bank post that, both Key and Huntington. Then saw the value of doing a strategic investment in us, and so since that time, I think the banking channel has taken off. The phrase virtual account management is really big on the bank's radars. It's sort of that evolve or die,
mhm,
because it is true. It's happening, right? They're losing share to whether it's the top five banks or whether it's the non-bank FIs that
mhm,
are offering commercial and treasury managers and CFOs are offering them a better way to keep track of their money. They're offering them a better way to take care of their AR and AP. So if they take those options, then they're taking the deposits out of your bank. So the
mm,
banks are getting it, right? And what they do want is something a lot more elegant than the rip and replace options that are out there from the legacy players.
mhm. What are the other major segments other than banks that you cater to?
So we focused primarily, this was also part of the pivot that we did on GTM. Again, supporting any use case, we had a lot of startups that were in the consumer world. Given the regulatory environment, giving the bet that you place on a consumer program and the overhead associated with managing all of the risk and compliance, we shifted over to focus more on B2B. So we focus on corporate payables, we focus on AR/AP automation, expense management, commercial credit, and anywhere where you're looking to have sort of a product that can combine digital wallet, access to a credit line, access to the wallet through a card, both virtual and physical, and then the ease with which to move that money in and out and know who is coming from and where it's going to.
Hmm.
But for sure, we're focusing on those verticals only today for a couple of reasons. One, there's less regulatory risk overall. It's a faster time to market than consumer, and we believe in the consumer space. A lot of the winners have been anointed, so
Hmm.
the challengers have a very hard adoption curve to overcome, and so we've watched how hard and difficult that can be. So for qolo, even though we could do it, we're choosing not to spend our time there. We're choosing to spend our time in places where we can monetize more quickly.
Hmm. How would you characterize the current phase you're in terms of the company life cycle, and maybe a hint towards kind of what scale you're at currently?
Yeah, I think that I'm smiling because we actually just did an all hands where we said that we're on the cusp of outgrowing our teen years as a company. So it's like, okay, we went through, navigating really tough times in the capital markets where, multiples were getting course corrected in private and public financial worlds. And we were realizing that in a startup, you have precious resources associated with everything you do, right? So everything you do has to have a reason. Every dollar you spend has to have an outcome that you have to show very quickly, right? And so it's all about cash and runway in a startup phase. And during that time, you still need to be agile. You still need to delight your clients. You still need to communicate, and you still need to get to that sort of growth stage where you're churning into a rinse repeat, right? Where things aren't as chaotic as they are in the early days of the startup. And so we compared that to like, when you're in middle school and you're a teenager and you're going through puberty and then all this bad stuff's happening and you come out the other side. And if you have kids, you're like, oh, okay, there's my kid again, right? And
Hmm.
that's really the last few years. I would describe the last few years of our growth is that we saw difficult markets, we made hard decisions, we reorganized ourselves. We refined our GTM. We proved validated, I guess, our original thesis was on point, particularly because there were things happening in the market where banking as a service and having a middle layer was great, but maybe not as durable as doing it the way qolo did it at the infrastructure level. So we got through that phase because we have direct hooks into the banks and the networks. And so that's better economics, it's better
Mm.
control. And at the same time, there was this thing called Synapse and Evolve happening, and it's big, spotlight being shined on what's a ledger and is it really keeping track of your money? Is it really bank grade? Do you understand how to partner as a fintech and a bank together so that you never have those same issues? That was happening during that time. So it started to really resonate with folks when they understood the power of what we built and how we could unify everything and help them reconcile and get real-time insight and transparency. We started taking off, right? So
Mhm.
we're in a place right now where I'd say we're in the growth stage. We're, certainly targeted very, finitely on the commercial verticals I told you about, as well as the banks. The bank channel is super hot. And those aren't, the bank channel is a whole different sales motion, and it's definitely, people cringe sometimes when you're talking about selling into banks and how challenging it can be. It is, but I'd say the time is right and the time is now. So we're line of sight to profitability. We love the direction and trajectory of our numbers and our company, and we look back at the last 3 years, and it was not easy, but we did it.
And so you're kind of in this early adulthood or maybe rapidly approaching adulthood. And so the focus then is the sales motions, then is getting the product out there, getting your solutions out there.
Yeah, and it's also, we reach this, early adulthood and, very aware and conscious that what you don't want to do in that phase of your life is believe you know everything.
Hmm.
So always with, humility here where we do believe we have a very differentiated and unique proposition to offer to commercial banks and to offer to these fintech verticals that we're focused on. We actually have really moved more into very disciplined prospecting stage. Back in the day, the 2022 area, things were falling from the sky, leads, this and that, and in some ways that can still be true today. The question is, what do you do with it? How do you spend your time, and how do you actually create a rubric, if you will, where you know what to say no to, what to look for, whether it's the customer profile, the ideal customer profile, so we're pretty good at being very disciplined. And like, how are
Hmm.
you spending your time? This sounds exciting over here, and it's like could be this great opportunity. And then you dig in and you're like, okay, wait, it's a startup, it's got a consumer bent, it's got this. And I think keeping that discipline in place can be very hard because you're turning away business. And
Mm,
you're also sort of talking to big banks and we're this little tiny startup. And it's like the dichotomy is odd, but it's absolutely crucial to our survival and our growth to get into the next phase of adulthood.
mhm. Um, I don't believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but was this company founding qolo and then becoming CEO, was this your first time leading like an organization as a CEO? And so you're nodding yes. What was different about this role than other ones in the past, and how did you kind of adapt to it fairly quickly?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so much I've learned that I want to, you always want to help other people once you learn it and make a fool of yourself in the process, because I have done that plenty of times. But, coming off the back of being a fairly senior executive, nice salary, running a P&L, I had, hundreds of people, in my line of reporting and all of that jazz. And so it's like, well, if I can do this, I can do a startup. Now, I had the luxury of having had both experiences, right? Working at a big company, being executive, and then working at a startup. I will tell you that even at the startups, the grind, the pace, the the good stuff too, it's not the same when you don't have the sort of founder CEO. This
Mm,
is my baby, and
mm,
yes, we have a board, and yes, we have investors to report to, but the dynamic of sort of waking up every day and saying, I can create jobs, I can grow my company. I can help commercial clients and banks. I can do all of these things, and it's a lot, right, on your shoulders. It's like this is a big deal. Like I have to take this so much more seriously, and it's not that I never didn't do that, even when I wasn't a founder, but it's just a different level of um, purpose, if you
mm,
will.
mm,
And that's what I love about it. I wish I'd done it sooner, but I have no regrets. I think everything led up to this for a reason. But teaching others in the future for sure, because transitioning from being a corporate executive and being successful, and then getting thrown into pitch to a VC firm, like it is not easy, right? It is like I still laugh at some of my early days and the things that we did, the questions that I didn't know the answers to, and imparting that knowledge and helping other people go through it maybe with a few less bumps and bruises than I did is something I'd love to think about in the future.
Is there one kind of insight you could share with, and maybe you kind of learned this, in the more recent years as you kind of face challenges as the founder and CEO, um, that you could share with another person that maybe is going through a similar journey where they switched over from working for someone else to then owning, fully owning their the outcomes of their actions related to leading a company.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most difficult thing that any of us can go through as a business executive, whether you're in a startup or a large company, is predicting things that you have to course correct. And I'll tell you that we did some reductions in force, and there, when going into this as an older executive, and I would have told you 4 years ago, I will never make that mistake. I will never make that mistake.
Mm,
And going through that and having the sensitivity around what it actually means and people's livelihood, and then also looking back and saying, how did this happen and why, what did I do wrong that I can do better? To me, because it's always personal. This is we spend more time of our life at work sometimes than we do with our families. So that personal experience is something I think people have to accept as part of doing something like this.
hmm
It's just a very, very, to me, it's the hardest thing about any job is like, do I have the right people? Did I hire the right people? Um, are they, in the right role at the right time in the right stage of our company?
hmm
And those questions, again, when you're a startup and you're venture capital backed, though you answer to someone, right? So
Right.
it's your company, it's my baby, right? But we answer to people, right? We have stakeholders, we have investors, and those are the hard decisions that you have to make, I would just say, knowing that, those things are on your plate as a CEO and a founder, and that you have to make those hard decisions for the entire company, right? What is best for the company? What is best for the company? What is best for the company? And
Yeah.
and sometimes means doing these harder things. And I'd say, if anything, I would just give advice to people around, the expectations of that, and more sensitivity around, how things happen. But there's no easy way. There's no easy answer when you're faced with that type of decision.